Hello, good afternoon everyone. This is Gaurav. Today we discuss about the concept of object oriented programming in Java. So first we discuss about why we need object oriented programming. So in procedure oriented programming, you see that is a programming pattern or model used to develop the software application. In this approach, the main task is divided into multiple subtasks, and each task is implemented by uh, specific functions or procedure. So what the problems or limitations comes in this approach? The first one is no reusability. No reusability that when you ask for a specific task, you focus on the specific task. For example, if you add two numbers, you design a implemented a one function for adding two numbers. Now later you have to uh, choose the three addition numbers. Okay, you have to choose additions of three numbers, then you have to implement one more functions. So that's where you have to know reuse these specific functions again. So this is the no reusability will be occurs. So this is one limitations occur in the procedure oriented programming. The next one is flow control loss. So when you write the code in 10 lines of code, the flow of a control of a code is flow. Okay, you have to control in the code what type of flow will be occurred in this code. But when you write the 800,000 lines of code, that the flow of a code will be lost. So these one more limitations in procedure oriented programming. And the third one is unstructured way. Procedure oriented approach is focused on the tasks rather than the what type of data we have. So this is also an unstructured way. So these are the limitations occurs in the procedure oriented way. That's why we need object oriented programming. Now let's come define object oriented programming. So this is a very simple definition I explained. Object oriented programming is a programming pattern or we say model that makes the uses of objects and their interaction to design and implemented applications. For let's see one example to more clear. Let's see one example banking system. So in banking system we have a object like bank, employee, customers. So bank, employee and customer, these are the objects, and bank is interact with the customer is interact with the bank employee. So these are the interactions. So that's the way approach that we have to uses of objects we have to use. For example, let's bank, customers and a bank employee, these are the objects. So uses of these objects and their interaction that's a bank employee interact with the customer interact with the bank. So with the help of uses of these objects and their interaction, we have to design and implement the application. Let's see one more example. College management system. In college management system, suppose applications, uh, we have a object like college, faculty, non-teaching staff, students. So these are the objects. So uses of these objects and their interaction means college is interaction with the faculty is interaction with the non-teaching staff is interaction with the students. So with the uses of these objects and interaction, we have to design and implement the application. So there are lots of examples. We have to see online ticketing. You have a IRCTC website. Go to the book the ticket. So all these uses of these objects and their interaction, we have to design the implemented applications. So this is the basic definition of object oriented approach. Now let's come to the object oriented programming concepts. So we have to see one by one. Object, class, encapsulation, abstraction, polymorphism, inheritance. So for object we have to represent as a memory. Class is just we have to collections of objects with of similar types of data and methods. Encapsulation, wrapping of data and function into a single unit. Abstraction, the showing the only the necessary part, hiding the implementation. And polymorphism is the ability or a data process more than one form. And inheritance, you're also getting one class property into another class is called inheritance. So these are the concepts we have to discuss in deep in OOPS concept. So we have to see one by one. We start with the object. So object is an entity which does exist as state and behavior. So as any entity which does exist state and behavior is called an object. For example, dog has state, color, name, breed. These are the states of a dog, and behavior is a dog has barking, eating. This is the behavior. So any entity which does exist means in software terminology we have to exist some memory. So any entity which does exist as state and behavior is called an object. So any entity which does not exist, that means it is not an object. For any entity which does not exist an object, which does not exist, for example, feelings is not an state and behavior, emotions is not an exist, is that entity that doesn't exist. So that type of entities doesn't exist means it is not an object. So in real world example of an object like pencil, apple, book, bag, board, these are the objects. So any entity which does exist, state and behavior is called an object. And these are the characteristics of objects: state, behavior and identity. Next one, class. After we discuss the object, we have to move to the class. Class contains data declaration. In data declaration, we have to see static and instance variable, and method declaration. Method means we have to talking about the behavior. So in other simple words, we have to say that class is a collection of objects that have similar uh, type of data and similar types of methods. It's called a class. For example, you have to create one class here, rectangle. Data declaration, you have to write integer width and length, and method, that is area and parameter. So here we have to declare the rectangle class. These are the data declarations, that is static or we say instance variable, and method declarations which behave like a behavior, integer, area and parameter. So you have to write calculate the area of a rectangle, you have to calculate the parameter of a rectangle. So some more important point about class also we discuss. Class can be defined as a blueprint that describe the state and behavior that objects of its type support. So class is used to represent collection of objects that they have similar properties and they have similar methods. And class is a blueprint. It decides object creation. Without class, we are unable to create object. So based on the single class, it is possible to create multiple objects, but every object occupy memory. So an object is an occupied, every object occupies memory. So this is one more example, so related to the class and class, that is we have to create one class man, and here we have to write the declaration, string name, age, height, and these are the methods: working, hungry and sleeping. So you have to collect similar types of data and similar types of method, that's called a class. Now, so class contains variables. So variables basically are divided into two types. First one is primitive variable and the second one is reference variable. Primitive variables can be used to represent primitive values. For example, integer x equals to 10. This is a primitive variable. You have to declare the x. Then next one is reference variable, can be used to refer objects. For example, here you have to write employee class E, that is object that treated as a reference variable new employee. For creating an object in Java, we have to use the new keyword to create new object, and there are two steps when creating an object from a class. First one is declaration and second one is initialization. So declaration, variable declarations with a variable name with an object type, and initialization, new keyword is followed by a call to constructor, and this call to initialize the new object. So the based on the purpose and position of all the declaration, all variables are divided into three types. The first one is instance variable, second one is static variable, and the third one is local variable. Let's see one by one. First we discuss about the instance variable. So instance variables are those variables which declared inside the class but outside the method or constructor. Constructor will discuss in the next topic, so no, just we have to aware about what is instance variable. इंस्टेंस वेरिएबल जो ऐसे वेरिएबल जो हम लोग क्लास के अंदर डिक्लेयर करते हैं बट आउटसाइड द मेथड और कंस्ट्रक्टर. If the value of a variable is varied from object to object, such type of variables are called instance variable. For every object, a separate copy of instance variable will be created. So these are the key points of the instance variable you have to very well know about. So scope of instance variable is exactly same as the scope of the object. Instance variable will be created at a time of object creation and destroyed at the time of object destruction. Okay, so with the help of instance variable will be created at time of object creation. So when you create the object, that time instance variable will be created, and when you destroy at a time of object destruction, it will be destroyed. Instance variable cannot be accessed from static method directly. It can access by using object reference. So when you call instance variable from the static area, when you call through inside the static method, then it cannot access directly. You can access by using the object reference. We have to see later in the example. Instance variable are also known as object label variable or attribute. So these are the key points of the instance variable. Let's see one example. Here we have to declare class test integer x equals to 10. We have to declare main function x. So here instance variable you have to declare inside the class and outside the method or constructor. That type of variables are called instance variables. So when you access these instance variable, you inside the static area, you cannot access directly. So you have to access these instance variable directly, but it can't access. So with access we have to use the object. So let's see one more example. So how to access the instance variable. Here again we have to declare some instance variable, boolean b, integer x, string s, and here you have to define main function. You have to declare main class test. You have to create an object t, that is reference variable, and with the help of object at reference variable you have to call the instance variable. You have to access the instance variable. So I already declared in the instance variable point that you cannot access directly instance variable in the static area. If you can access instance variable, you can access through the object. So you have to access to t dot b. So you have to access the value of boolean. So you have to boolean, you have to not define initialize any value. So by default boolean value is false, and x, that is integer, default value is 0, string s, default value is null. Now next one is static variable. After instance variable, let's discuss about the static variable. Instance variable, for every object a separate copy will be created, but in case of static variable, single copy created at class level and copy will be shared by all the object of that class. So this is the difference also, the instance variable and static variable. Static variable is created at a time of class loading and destroyed at the time of class unloading. And static variable can be accessed either by using class name or by using object reference, but recommended to use class name. So this is one more also you have to say difference between instance variable and static variable. Within the same class, even it is not required to use class name, we can access directly also. So these are the points of the static variable. Now let's discuss about the local variable. To meet the temporary requirement, we have to create variable inside method or constructor. So any variable you have to declare inside a method or constructor as a temporary requirement, you have to prefer to local variable. So local variable is also known as stack variable, automatic variable, or temporary variable. Local variable is stored in stack, and its only applicable modifier for the local variable is final. If we are using any other modifier, we will get some compile time error. Now let's see one practical example of using how to create a classes and object. Okay, so let's see one example of applications of classes and objects. So first I create one class here, and the class name I mention here the employee class. And inside of class you have to collect the related data and methods. Okay, so first I create the data, that is instance variable we have to create it. I create the employee data, that is first one is employee ID, employee name. So employee name is in string form, so write employee name. I use camel style. Camel style, that is first word will be small and the second word first letter will start with the capital. And next one is company name. Company name is also in string form, so I write company name. Next one, employee age. So employee age is in the integer form, so I mention integer. And the next one is float, employee salary. So these are the instance variable. Why we say that instance variable? Because we create the inside the class and outside the method. Okay, we not mention here the inside the method here. So we have, these are the instance variable. Now I create a method here. So I write the method name here, void get data. So void get data, we have to collect the input from the user. So anything you have to take input through the keyboard, you have to use a predefined class, that is scanner class. So scanner class आपने previous videos में देखे होंगे कि हम लोग scanner class को कैसे use करते हैं. यहाँ पे हम लोग scanner class को use कर रहे हैं. So first I write the syntax of the scanner class object new scanner, and defining the available class system.in. Now I write a sentence here, system.out.println. So anything you have to print the message, you have to write system.in.println, and you have to write here enter employee ID. Enter employee ID. So here employee ID variable you have to use integer, so just write it employee ID. And the string scanner object we have to use scw dot. So by default the is in string form, so if anything you have to convert string to integer, you have to use the method next int method. So this is enter employee ID. So just I copy the message again and paste it here. Enter employee name. Just I editing here employee name. So employee name is a string form, so no need to convert it any. Just write the next method, and here we have to store in the employee name. Next one you have to write company name. So you have to write enter company name. I copy and paste it and just edit it to save the time also. Company name, and company name is also available in the string form, so no need to write next int, just write simply next method. Okay. So employee ID, employee name, company name, and the next one is the employee age. So just write employee, enter employee age, and here you have to store in the employee age. So employee age is in the integer form, so just write it next int method. And one more message I want to print, that is employee salary. So just write employee salary, and employee salary is in the float form, so just write it next to float method. Next float method, and this is stored in the employee salary. So I just add it here also. So this way you have to take input from the user. First enter employee ID, name, company name, age and salary. So I want to print these values also. So if you want to print values, so you have to use one more method here, void show method. Now I have to print the value here, the employee ID. So you have to just delete enter. The employee ID is, and you have to print a message also, just you have to concatenate it, employee ID. Okay, I just copy this and editing here. I want to print 5 values, so I use 5. Enter employee ID, employee name, next is just want to change here also, employee name, company name, next one is employee salary, and the next one is the employee age. Okay, so here we have to create one class employee. You have to use instance variable. Okay, so here we have to use instance variable. Now here we have to use get data and show data. These are the member functions. So command an instance variable or global variable or member function, we have to create a one class employee here. Now I need to create a main function here, from where the compiler can call the method, that is I write public static void main string args. This command and argument. Now I create an object here, employee object equals to new employee. So through the object you have to call the method here. First one is get data, and the next one is the show data. तो सबसे पहले आपका प्रोग्राम मेन फंक्शन से कॉल होगा, एम्प्लॉय क्लास का आपने ऑब्जेक्ट बनाया है, तो आप ऑब्जेक्ट के थ्रू कम्युनिकेट करेंगे एम्प्लॉय डॉट गेट डाटा। सबसे पहले आपका गेट डाटा के अंदर जो भी आपने मेंशन करा है, यू हैव टू यूज इनपुट थ्रू दैट डाटा। आप सबसे पहले एम्प्लॉय आईडी, एम्प्लॉय नेम, कंपनी नेम, एज और सैलरी इनपुट कराएंगे। देन यू हैव टू शो डाटा, जो भी आप वैल्यू इनपुट करा रहे हैं उस वैल्यूज़ को आप प्रिंट करा रहे हैं। एम्प्लॉय आईडी आपने क्या मेंशन करा, सो लेट्स सी द आउटपुट हियर। So first I compile the program now, like java c space class name is employee.java, that is your file name. Okay, so one error here, so no issue, that is company ID is next it. So I just check the code here once again. So here we have to find enter company name. In enter company name you have to write company ID, and company ID variable you have to not create any. So company name you have to write. So I just resolve the error here, company name. Okay, just save the program. Anything you want to change, again save the program and again compile it. Okay, so now it's compiled. I just clear the screen now. First compile successful. Now run it. For run you can write simply java space class name. So first I enter employee ID. So employee ID just write 45, employee name, employee name I write Gaurav. Company name, suppose I write any company name I have to write. For example, I write TCS. Enter employee age. So employee age, so you have to write enter 34. Enter employee salary. So employee salary, suppose I write enter 30,000. Okay, so you have to print here employee ID, employee name, company name, employee salary. Employee salary is in float form, you have to declare, so it display in the float form. Employee age is 34. So this way you have to use the one application you have to see for using classes and object.